but I wasn't managing my grief very well. And this is something that I'm sure you guys know through your experience, especially in males. You swallow it. You know, you force it down, right? And what ends up happening is it's going to come out in using negative ways when you don't want it to. People say, you know, there's no wrong way to grieve. There's wrong ways to grieve.
Just like a jiu-jitsu roll.
Yeah.
Why is that the first time
I don't know.
we've ever?
Maybe because we have like
It's all jiu-jitsu guys right here.
Yeah.
Like,
I never thought about that till now. Yeah, so we usually like do the clap before we start recording.
yeah.
And
It's just like we're getting ready to show a technique or something.
yeah. So for those of you watching, listening, our setup here is a little different today.
We're normally two therapists at a bar.
Yeah.
But we're two therapists at a couch behind a bar.
Right. Exactly. With a honored guest
Yeah.
with us here.
Gene.
Yeah. Thanks,
Gene
guys.
Fott.
Yeah, so my
you,
name is
man.
Gene Fott, right? So, but I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah,
Really
man.
appreciate it.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for making the time
No, we're
coming out.
yeah, we're really privileged to have you out here, and it's interesting because I think we were telling you earlier too. Like, this is number 20,
Yeah, episode 20.
episode 20, so it's kind of cool and kind of special. So it was only appropriate for us to be like, all right, yeah, we need to have somebody on for this one.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, and obviously the topic that we wanted to get into tonight is one we haven't really touched on much. We've gone a little bit into some pieces, like as far as like we've talked about like PTSD and certain things of that nature, depression obviously, and which can all be interrelated, I'm sure will be with some of our conversation, but grief. And obviously I think every human has experienced grief to some degree. But I think that there are those pieces and those things that in certain ways just make it a little bit more profound.
Yeah.
And your story is one that I think is very powerful, especially given some of the pieces that we've talked about so far on our own podcast. Like, obviously, we're jiu-jitsu guys,
Yeah.
right? And so I thought it was only appropriate to really get the opportunity to hear from you and kind of get to know a little bit of your story. Obviously, I know some of it, but I'm wondering if you don't mind sharing a little bit, like, okay, what has been your experience with this word?
Go ahead, David.
I want to hear. Yeah. Before we dive into that, could you give us a brief, just an intro? Who's Gene? Where do you work at?
I'm jumping the ship
you're
here.
Yeah. No, we want to dive right into things
Yeah.
too. I don't want to waste time, but in terms of just like who is wonderful man Gene here standing before us?
So my name is Gene Fott. I own Renzo, Gracie, Martinsburg in Martinsburg, West Virginia. I've been training jiu-jitsu since April of 2014 is when I first started, when I put on a gi. Started in the garage.
Nice.
A buddy of mine, Matt Bean. All right.
Nice.
And it's a funny story with that. We actually met at a mutual friend's like get together. I forget, it was like some sporting event, right? And we started talking, and he's like, "Hey, you should come out to my garage and train jiu-jitsu." And I was like, "Has anyone ever taken you up on that offer? Like, you just met me, you know, like you already invited me like to train jiu-jitsu." And then, like a week later, I actually ended up texting him, and he's like,
Nice.
"No, you're the first person that's ever taken me up on the offer." And then kind of started from there.
That's great.
But and then so yeah, like I said, with that, and then I'm also a board member and the public policy chair for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and I'm also the founder for Grapple for Life, which is my nonprofit, which utilizes jiu-jitsu to kind of help battle people that have been affected by suicide or depression or things of that nature. So,
And like career wise, work wise.
so I've been in government service since 2002. So I started with Washington State. And then once Washington State in 2012, I joined the federal system. I'm with the Department of Justice, and so I'm with the National Gang Unit. And I'm stationed out of Martinsburg also.
Oh, awesome. Cool. So you do all of that.
Yes. Yeah.
When do you sleep?
That's probably my biggest problem, and it's probably one of the reasons why, like, in the last 4 years, I've had 6 surgeries. So I'm thinking, like, recovery's been an issue. So it's something my wife beats on me all the time about it. Like, like, it's the one thing she nags me about, which she rightly has to do so, because, like, sleep's a big one.
Yeah,
you know, and like something we'll be talking about later down the road, but it's also something that my counselor is also gets on me a lot about is my workload and making sure I'm getting enough sleep, because you guys know sleep is also a very big factor in managing, you know, depression and managing your emotional state.
But that's awesome, by the way. And you said that I completely forgot what I was gonna say. What was it?
Government work.
Yeah, government work.
Like,
so the injury. Yeah, the
injuries.
surgeries. Are those from jiu-jitsu injuries?
Yes.
All of them.
Yeah, every single one of them has been jiu-jitsu related.
If you're trying to start jiu-jitsu,
and the crazy part is it was nothing of like malicious intent or like. Most of them were freak accidents.
I feel like rarely is it ever like malicious intent. Exactly. Like some like that's the one thing about a jiu-jitsu gym. Like rarely is it like I am trying to hurt you and then I'm going to like.
So actually, like majority of the injuries, like my neck surgery, was just wear and tear. I mean, like that's a decade of grappling, wear and tear on yourself. Also, like wear and tear, in the weight room, and then jiu-jitsu, and then as you're getting older, and then the funny part is like most of the injuries came from me actually being the one attacking. It wasn't even like a submission on me. I remember like when I ruptured my right distal bicep tendon, it was actually me doing an arm drag. Oh. And I ended up rupturing my own, and the other one, when I ruptured my other one, it was me doing an arm bar on somebody else. Right.
Nice.
So yeah,
that's
crazy.
That is like a freak accident.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then like when I ruptured my tricep, that was me actually doing
tricep.
Yeah. So that was actually me doing a long step pass where I had the pant grip.
Yeah.
You know how you punch that out when you long step out, and that's when it ruptured. And then and they had to go back in twice for the tricep. Because
what's been like your worst injury?
Right now is the recent one that I had, which was my bucket handle meniscus tear that I had in my right knee. So
your knee.
This one right now has been the most frustrating. I was the most freaked out about my neck surgery. That's the one where I got that's one I was like the most nervous about, but that was actually out of all my surgeries the easiest and quickest recovery.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, my neck is. I didn't think my neck was tight, but then I rolled with like Andy, our resident Hulk, like for about an hour straight today.
Yeah.
And and he smothered me for a good while, and that was good. But now, needless to say, I was like, no, I'm good, and then like just turning it slightly here, that back time.
And you have a surgery scheduled.
Yes, I do. Sure. And mine, though, I guess mine is jiu-jitsu related. Like the two incidences that happened, I think for mine that I can think back to where I felt an audible pop like in my hip was one, I got caught in an electric chair as a white belt and I felt a pop at that point. And then the second was many weeks later after that happened, a few months, I was training for a comp and I was doing wind sprints at the track. And I just went for it and just pop and those are the only two incidences that I really felt like, as far as like with my hip, that it was like, oh, something's going on there. I just don't know what. But so that's part of the game.
Yeah. But I also think like we need to be more mindful of like the recovery aspect, because I didn't really think about it till later in my career, which I try to tell the younger guys now, like really focus on your mobility training over like just trying to get super strong.
Yeah.
Like instead of like if you're listen to your body, there's a fine line between where you feel like you're being lazy, but then you're also like revving too hard.
100%.
Right. So like if you just had like a 2-hour rolling session the night, the night before, should you be doing wind sprints the next day?
Oh,
you know what I mean?
100%.
Well, in our minds, we're like, yeah, we need to.
Yeah.
Right.
Get it.
Exactly. We got to get after it. That whole mindset. But then, because we look at like professional athletes or like other like top tier people, and you're like, you see how they're training, but they're not working full-time jobs. They're not like, they're getting, maybe a little more pampering or more massages, like whatever that you're
100%.
not. able to get. So
yeah, and I think that's one thing in jiu-jitsu we actually don't do very well as a whole, at least from all the gyms I've been in that, like, it's like every night you come in and you roll, and it's like if we were like, and I need to do it more too, is like intentionally telling people, all right, like I want you guys, if this is your hard night and you're gonna roll hard tonight, like I want you to, like, one night that you're in here to just be taking it easy.
Yeah.
Like intentionally telling people to take it easy so that
right.
they're not in here killing it every night, because it is a recipe to tear down your body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Essentially. It's like a dysfunctional relationship.
Yeah.
Like you just keep going in for a beating like night after night.
And I remember, like, my coach James Foster, like, he was always really good about that. Like when we were getting ready for like competitions or super fights or something like that, he would monitor like how heavy we were breathing. So like 3 days out, you know, I might just be doing some drilling, maybe like some drilling stuff, and all of a sudden I'll just hear from the corner, like, you're breathing too heavy, like slow it down.
Slow it down.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
Yeah, see, and that's like I remember hearing that, like, when I was prepping for comps, but like those 3 days before the comp is like the only time that I would ever like really scale it back intentionally. And I don't think I learned quickly enough to say, like, all right, like, no, like, you should, it's totally okay for you to be going easier now. And just, hey, you're drilling through positions. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you get subbed, like, you need to be at this threshold of exertion. Yeah, lessons we learn.
absolutely.
Lessons we learn.
But now it's our responsibility to pass it on to everybody else.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm sure this is gonna tie back into the grief topic at some point. This
lessons we learn.
But we'll get to that. But thank you for that introduction. Helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to Neil's question.
So David, typically this is how it goes: is that David is a very good monitor of like how I'm, because I'll be all over the place.
Yeah.
Like, but back to that question though of, okay, so we've heard from you, we've heard about you. Do you mind kind of telling us a little bit about, your experience with that word, with grief?
So, April 11th of 2019, I lost my daughter to suicide. And she was 15. It was 25 days before her 16th birthday. So I remember it was a Thursday. It was comp class. So I was just finished training. I got home, and, you know, I usually cook something up to eat, you know, post training, you know, trying to get some food, you're starving. And I always would go knock on her door and be like, hey, you want to join me for a meal? You know, talk story and things like that. No answer. And, you know, and that's where we ended up finding her. And, you know, I went through the process, you know, of trying to, you know, do first aid and all that stuff. And kind of went from there. And then, obviously, the aftermath of that's just, you know, it's devastating, right? So I went through all the stuff, stages of depression. Like, there were days where, like, even the thought of brushing your teeth or eating or getting up and doing anything was just too much. I mean, it was just pretty much bedridden, you know. And then slowly, you know, you're just trying to manage getting through the days, minutes, and it was, you know, you start going through all sorts of emotions at various times. And then sometimes there's like emotions you go through that you can't even really put a name on. It's very weird, you know. But I remember jiu-jitsu was something that was really big, you know. I remember when I got back, I wasn't ready to deal with people. I wasn't ready for questions. I wasn't ready. Because sometimes, you know, like, people mean well, but they'll ask some very silly questions or make some silly comments, you know, that, you know, like I said, they mean well. But, and so I wasn't ready to deal with people, but my teammates got me back into training. It was all closed door trainings with like select groups of people that I was close with. Yeah. And that's how it kind of started. And then it went from there, progressed into, you know, occasional open mats, and then resuming regular trainings. As time went on, I realized, you know, okay, things are getting better on this end, but I wasn't managing my grief very well. And this is something that I'm sure you guys know through your experience, especially in males. you swallow it. You know, you force it down, right? And what ends up happening is it's going to come out in using negative ways when you don't want it to, right? Emotional outbursts, reckless behavior was a big one for me, and then like fits of like just rage. Like I remember one vividly, just cooking eggs, you know, and then like I wanted sunny side up eggs, and one of my yolk broke and I lost it. And I took this pan and I beat the sink with it, folded the pan in half, cracked my sink all over, like.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is, and then I was going through a lot of instances where I was like extremely reckless behavior, and then I realized like I need to get help.
Yeah.
All right. So, and then when I ended up finally seeing a specialist, this is where I kind of started learning about how to manage. I wasn't managing my grief. Right. It was I was constantly letting it be a pressure cooker, and then it would pop.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where like now I'm having to manage it. Like everyone's got a different system. Grief is one of those weird things. It's not like a 12-step program. Right. There's not a step 1, step 2, step 3. Right. Grief, like it's a big open with a bunch of different emotions and all this stuff, but everyone's path to each one's different. Some of them you might not even hit. So
Yeah.
you know, that's my experience anyways. And then so now, you know, I kind of, you start understanding like when it might be getting it's coming up. So I have a system now to where like I manage my if I feel like it's coming, you know, I'm having some issues or some emotional flare-ups, I'll make sure that I control when I go through the grieving process. So like for me, I'll have a memory box of hers that I made. It's got a lot of her stuff in it, like cards she made me and things like that.
Yeah.
And I'll go through that. I'll pick a time. You know, it's like maybe 20 minutes, maybe 35 minutes. I set a timer, and during that time, no one bothers me. My phone is off. I'll listen to music that maybe we shared together, things that she listened to. I'll go through the memory box. Whatever emotions I go through.
Yeah.
And once the timer goes off, I
Yeah.
put everything away, and now it's time. I'm controlling now the grief. I'm managing it instead of it managing me.
Sure.
Right. Now that works for me, but that might work for somebody else, but that's some system that we ended up coming up with that, has helped me tremendously. So
I think that sounds really on point. I think with a lot of things, one of the adages I think that people miss sometimes, and you brought it up, is that I believe that, bottling gets a bad rap, right? But people forget that bottles have tops. You can take it off, pour it out with your intention when you want to.
Yes.
And it sounds like that's part of that rhythm for you as far as how that looks.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, if I go back a little bit to some of the
absolutely.
pieces there, first of all, damn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that. But second of all, I'm curious, you mentioned, okay, like you're training and then you get home. I'm sure that a lot of the questions, and you tell me, do you feel like this was something that was part of the struggle with it so much so that you didn't see it coming?
So, I remember her talking to me about, she was feeling off and she wanted to see a counselor.
Yeah.
So I was trying through, my employer's EAP program and all this stuff. And I just could not find her a counselor. Like everyone was just booked out. Booked out.
That is a thing.
I started expanding the search radius, from 10 miles, 25 miles, 50 miles, 100 miles, calling. And I just could not, and then, she was also my gym partner. So I was also managing, like, and I was telling her, hey, I'm trying to find you a counselor. I'm having difficulties. Like, they're all like booked out by months.
So she trained
her.
No, in the gym.
Okay.
In the gym.
Yeah.
Like she took a couple of jiu-jitsu classes and, she trained in the garage with me.
Oh, okay.
I got
Yeah,
you.
but
Yeah.
so we'd go to the gym, and that's where we gym talk. Where you talk.
Yeah.
We work out together and we talk, and I was kind of managing, and it's never just one thing.
No.
That's something I learned through my deep dive into it.
Sure.
Everyone always looks for that one thing. So like even in the news and the media, they'll be like, "Oh, this person lost their job, so they ended their life." Or when it wasn't just that, might have been the catalyst.
Sure.
Yes.
But there's
might have been the straw.
Yeah, but there's always like other things behind the scenes. It's an accumulation effect, right? It's never just one thing that But people always want an answer, and that's still something where I have to come to terms with. Where like you're never gonna like the why.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something like I still struggle with on occasion. But I also got to, remind myself that you're just never going to, that's a question you're just never going to get an answer to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
I
think I might have sidebarred a little bit.
No,
Okay.
good.
No, here's a sidebar.
All right.
No.
It's just processing. So I don't have kids. I know Dale has, and one of the things I talk to Dale about is because I hear from a lot of my friends are having kids now around this age, like the age I'm at, and I keep hearing from them about how they're like, yeah, dude, there's something about when you have a child, like there's something that unlocks within you in terms of the love and attachment you have towards that child. Like maybe with your spouse, of course you love your spouse, but there's something about having a kid that comes out. And I heard it said
she taught me how to love.
Yeah.
Like what it really meant.
Yeah.
Like in a different way, like you were saying, right? Like that attachment. I remember the first time, when she was born, when I cut there was the feeling I got. It was just, the whole, so.
Yeah. Someone told me, he's like, dude, be careful, beware of having kids, because it's like having your heart walking outside, traveling around.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's your heart just moving around and living its life. But that's just your heart. That's part of you.
When they hurt, you hurt.
Yeah.
Right? When they're happy, you're happy.
Yeah.
Right. So it's an extension, right? Like, it's an extension of yourself.
Right. Right. And it's and like going back to grief, that's what makes, I think that's the essence of grief, is that we grieve because we love. We grieve that which we love greatly. And
we grieve the loss of what we thought life was going to be. Like she was my only child. I had I had my eggs in that basket. Like she was a great student. She was getting scholarship offerings for her musicianship.
Really?
I mean, like
what does she play?
She played the flute. Wow. So she self-taught herself how to play the piano, guitar, and then, but when she picked up the flute, something like bam, and she was, smoking it, and then she was actually supposed to, before COVID hit, and all that stuff, but they were supposed to tour Europe, and she was actually selected to represent Washington State music and tour. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I still have that letter from the governor. So
And were you in Washington at this time?
Yes, so I was in Washington State.
Whereabouts in Washington?
So at that time, I was living in near Auburn.
Okay.
So I lived in so many areas in Washington because I moved there in, what was it, Thanksgiving Day of '97, and then I moved out here to West Virginia in April of 2021.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was there pretty much the whole time.
Wow.
Man, yeah. Where's home for you, by the way?
Not really, so that's a long story too.
Okay.
I was born in Korea. I moved to the United States. My dad, my adoptive dad, but he adopted me, and he was in the Air Force. Moved to Nellis Air Force Base, which is in Nevada, in '85, and then from '85 we moved to Utah, and then we were in Utah for a short amount of time. And then once he got out, I was already out the house at that time, but he was heading up back home because he's from Washington State. I didn't want to be away from my siblings, so I followed them up.
Yeah.
Okay, got you.
And I'm curious with obviously the loss of your daughter, what was the next closest thing for you that you feel like you experienced that was even remotely similar to that?
In wise of what? Like
in terms of like, was there anything else in your life that, and I don't want to ask this like rhetorically, but was there anything else in your life that was even reminiscent of that kind of pain for you?
No.
Okay.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
No. Nothing even close.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And
Had you had like close loved ones die before?
yeah. I mean, like,
Yeah.
But there's something to be expected of, like, we come to terms where, like, you're going to lose people through age, natural
Illness,
causes,
natural
yeah,
causes.
things like that, right?
Yeah.
And, but you never expect to, I know it's said all the time, but, you never expect to, you expect to, your kids to outlive you.
Yeah.
Right. So,
And I'm wondering, because, and you alluded to this already, right? The impacts that it had within your psyche in general, right? The impacts that it had within your self-care tools. Do you mind sharing a little bit, like, what that was like for you and your wife at the time? Or
yeah. So, my marriage, that was actually another one of the fallouts of the loss was, it resulted in a divorce. Like, we separated because of it. There was other reasons too.
yeah,
I wasn't exactly being a great anything at that time. Let's just being completely honest. I was. Like I said, I was very reckless in my behavior. Wasn't realizing, how much I was drinking, and
yeah,
the things of that, and people say, there's no wrong way to grieve. There's wrong ways to grieve.
100%.
Right? There's wrong ways to manage your losses and stuff. So, but I remarried since then, and she's actually been very integral in kind of helping me along the path, because this is something that, she's a social worker.
okay.
So
There you go.
Okay.
So she kind of she works for the VA,
Yeah.
and so she kind of knows some of that stuff, and she was the one that kind of started talking to me about, like, you need to get help. You need, like, the drinking and this and that. So it's like, and this was before we were actually married.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
there's things that was kind of like putting a spotlight on me, where I was like,
And it sounds like one that at that point in time you were okay with.
Yeah.
Like, you were, to some level, you were accepting of that.
yeah. Well, like I said, there was an incident. It was 4th of July. I got extremely intoxicated.
Of that same year? Of
It was,
2019?
no, it was, I think it was 2020. It's like a year after.
A year
A little
after,
after, a year after.
Yeah.
And then I ended up, like, leaving this party, and I'm in an area I don't even know, and I was just wandering. Like, I was like,
Lights out.
yeah, and doing all sorts of, going into people's yards, and next thing you know, I'm like, luckily they were able to find me through my GPS on my phone.
Where's Gina? Find my location.
Yeah, but like,
Thank God for iPhone.
and I think you guys have heard this. I didn't really know much about it, but, like, what do they call it? You're not wanting to end your life, but you don't have a care for your well-being.
Apathetic.
Yeah.
I don't know if is that what there is?
Well, so, I mean, that's just a term I'm calling it for right now, but it's actually slipping me right now as far as the specific term, but we would, like, as far as a classification, I don't know. I can't think of right now the proper DSM classification, but I think in most scenarios, like what you're talking about, like, you're describing it adequately, and I don't think it's missed there. Like in my mind, like what you're saying is you were completely indifferent.
Yeah, because in my mind at that time, I lost.
Right.
Like there was everything that I planned for in the future was gone.
Yeah.
Right. Like she was my legacy. Like I can't have any more kids.
Yeah.
You know. So like once I'm gone, like I'm gone.
Yeah.
Right. So she was going to carry, you know, so that's something else that I had to deal with. That was another, you know, like, you know, but now, you know, but it's also been taught, you know, like, yeah, my bloodline may be gone, but like your legacy can still be put on to like with the kids program. Like, you know, like with the work that I'm doing now, there's like, there's other aspects you got to look at it, you know, that kind of fill that void, you know. I try
that came later.
Yeah.
That came later.
I try to be very careful and mindful of the word. I think it gets thrown around a lot, which is the word heal. Because I think there's certain things that you just don't heal from. So when people say, you know, healing takes time, that's not
that feels like it'd be a little triggering.
Yeah. So there's not a or like I said, this too shall pass type stuff. You know, like there's a lot of sayings that people are so used to throwing out.
Especially
you'll move on.
Yeah.
You'll move on.
And it's like, no, what you do is you learn to work around that wound. But there's certain wounds that aren't gonna heal. They're they're
the weight doesn't change.
Yeah.
The weight doesn't change.
And just because someone carries weight well doesn't mean it's not heavy.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's one that, you know, in working with others and hearing other people's stories, the loss of a child I think on the periphery here, to me seems to be one of the most profound like that an individual can possibly experience. Because, and I think we've talked about this some in the past, I think that similarly to like, say with like, there's this framework around like PTSD, right? Like, why do people get PTSD in the first place? Like what's the problem exactly? Because you could have two people that undergo the same experience. One comes out with PTSD, one doesn't.
Yep.
Right. And so part of the idea there, or in one school of thought, is that, okay, well, what this has to do with is what the brain has become accustomed to accept in the reality of its existence, right? But with the loss of a child, that's one of those things that's so foreign. Like, how could I possibly even get to the place to where I can rationally accept that this could be an outcome here and be okay with that?
Yeah.
Like,
no, that's very valid, because like I said, there's still times now, even though I've been, you know, I know the tools and I've been given, I revert back to like those same feelings of, you know, the pain and the whole everything. You know, the legacy's gone. This is gone. My, you know, like everything that I was working for is gone. What my idea, what the future was, is gone.
Yeah.
So those are still battles that, you know, or it could come back, right? So,
you know, I'm curious now, because obviously, and I'm kind of weaving this into the same perspective, because in that same realm of thought, like with PTSD, for example, the one way that, as far as like we approach to address that, right? Whether it's personally, I have a history of post-traumatic stress disorder, and one of the most profound things that I came to was that idea, and how to address that idea was, okay, I had to be able to start to understand what are the values here that underpin my life.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, I had a crisis of faith, right, at certain points in my life. And I'm wondering for you, because that seems like, for obvious reasons, that shakes your entire foundation as a human being.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny you mention that, because it's like faith is very big for me now, like extremely big, and it's something I've recently found, and not just something I just recently found, but something that's also been very helpful.
Yeah.
So, you know, I got away from from my faith, as a Christian, young. I think that happens to us a lot, like when you were like Bible thumped when you were a kid.
Sure. Yeah.
Totally.
And then, you kind of get older and you kind of rebel out of it and you're like, okay, I'm done. And then I went through this big stage of like atheism or atheist and
agnostic.
And then it's agnostic, right? Sometimes I didn't know, other times it's like, nah, that's fake, right?
That's whatever.
And all that stuff, yeah.
Right.
And then I went into something that was very strange, which was I went on an attack.
Yeah.
Like I was extremely mad at religion, but I'm an atheist. So how can I be mad at something that I didn't even believe in, right? So that didn't even make sense. But at the time, I'm completely irrational. So not only was I...
Now, what time period was this in?
So this was after my loss.
Okay.
Oh, after the loss.
That makes sense.
I went...
That 100% makes sense.
And I remember going after people, like when they would bring it up. Like
they would bring it up quite a bit?
Not just being, no, it would just come up in conversation.
Okay,
They're not even trying to like
proselytize or
exactly,
anything. Yeah,
exactly. They're
just
talking about it. And I remember like attacking them.
Yeah.
Like not like name calling them, but like implying ignorance or implying, things of that nature. And then completely weird, but all of a sudden, recently, like, while I was going through this process of like, managing about, I don't know, probably say almost a year ago. Yeah. But my wife, she's religious. Yeah. And she's a Christian, and she was constantly trying to get me to go to church, and but she wouldn't push it because she understood.
Sure.
That it was a sensitive topic. And then, but she was praying all the time for me.
Sure.
Praying. Right. And then, all of a sudden, Cliff showed up on my algorithm. And I don't know if you guys know who Cliff Knight. I have a hard time.
His last name?
Yeah, Knight or something like that. But he speaks at schools.
Okay.
Right, and it's like Ask Cliff. It's like a kind of a segment thing.
Yes.
Man, I feel bad, and I don't got his last name because it's like it's spelled.
That's all right. We'll put it in the comments section. Yeah.
And then, but he I don't know. I just started listening to it because I'm like, okay, what kind of nonsense is this like guy gonna talk? And he started dismantling my arguments.
Don't you hate it when that happens?
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, all right. So then I just started like going into this stuff, and then looking. It ended up getting to the point where I started looking into it and investigating it. Because
you need to have a better argument.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what it led to was, wow. Right. Like
wow.
Yeah. It was just like, okay, all the stuff that I was using against it was being answered. Like even the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Sure.
And like the time frames and like the eyewitness accounts and just the evidence points more towards a God and Jesus Christ being who he says he is than not. And I come to find out now it takes more blind faith to be an atheist than it does to believe in Jesus.
And that's a really tricky point too. I was actually just listening to. It's funny that we're on the topic because literally yesterday or 2 days ago, I was talking to Dave because I was listening. What was the guy's name?
Wes Huff.
Wes Huff on Joe Rogan.
Yes.
Like earlier this year, and it's like because I'm a nerd and I nerd out on that stuff a lot, but it's true. Like it's we can't really disprove that Jesus existed. Like that's very evident.
Yeah.
Right. Like we know that he was here. We know that and so it's like, all right, like how many people saw him when he rose from the dead?
Yep.
That's a problematic because there was like hundreds of people.
Over 500.
Exactly, right? And so and now all of a sudden there's there's all these different pieces that begin to be really problematic,
Yes.
right? In order for us to be comfortable
Yeah.
in dismantling that. And
Yeah, it's what C.S. Lewis says. He's either a lord, a lunatic, or a liar.
exactly,
Like, based on the evidence that we have, he's either one of those three.
he can't be both.
Yeah.
And no, but that's very interesting that you share that. And I would say that's, I mean, admittedly, it's completely understandable that you would go through that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds completely on par, but it's also very profound and interesting too.
So it's actually like
Yeah.
got to the point where like I've gotten through all the Gospels. You know, I started reading a chapter a day.
Wow.
So I'm still going through it. I'm in. I just finished. 1 Corinthians.
Wow.
And I'm going to continue. You know,
Mm,
just
sure.
like that.
Yeah.
You know, I read with my wife,
Sure.
Yeah.
and the way things go, and then like the writings of Paul,
Mm.
because if you
Yeah.
because people don't realize like Paul was
Yeah.
he was a Christian terrorist.
Yes.
You know,
100%.
like-
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
and the reason I bring that up is because I mean, obviously, I wasn't murdering Christians or nothing like that, but
Antagonistic.
but I remember how hostile I was
Yeah, hostile,
towards
yeah.
him, and the same thing he was,
Yeah.
like towards,
Yeah.
and so if he could make that turnaround, and things like that, it's not too late for everybody
Oh, dude.
else, right?
Yeah. Well,
So-
and it's funny too, because it's like you get to Paul and you're like, wait, isn't this the same guy that just killed Stephen? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
like, and yeah, it's wild.
I'm curious, especially the first, like, let's say year after the loss. So I know you talked about. It sounds like you were just like in the wild,
Yeah.
kind of just like grasping,
Yeah,
trying to cope.
that's
right?
a very good description of it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
I'm grasping at anything I can to just keep myself afloat
yeah,
and give off the perception that, as a male, I bring this up a lot too, even in my posts and like when I talk, is there's this bravado that we, an image that we give ourselves and other people have, right?
Sure.
So, at that time, I'm competing a lot. I had this image of, the type of work that I do and, being a jiu-jitsu practitioner and competitor and this and that, and it's, you start going through and just being a male, like, just like, got to put it down. I'm good. I'm good. I don't need no help and all that stuff. And then that's something, so what ends up happening is behind the scenes, you're in the dark and you don't got anything under control. Everything's controlling you and you're just reaching for whatever to stay afloat.
yeah.
So
like the alcohol was that for
Yep.
you?
Yep.
Yeah,
And I didn't even realize how much I was actually drinking until my wife brought it up. And then
You probably become accustomed to it.
exactly right, and it was helping me.
It was a functionally dysfunctional mechanism.
yeah, and it was helping me, sleep and all this other stuff. Because
Oh, and that really messes with
and
you.
that and
you're
that's
still
something,
working, still doing, like you're functioning.
And then
but-
come to find out later, I've been through a lot of traumatic instances, due to my line of work.
Yeah.
But I was having the reoccurring nightmares.
Yeah.
Well,
and-
because
You actively tried to resuscitate it.
yes. So until I was pulled off by the police when they arrived.
Yeah.
So
How long was that?
I don't know. I couldn't put a time frame on it. There's more like snippets and
Probably seemed like it just was a moment.
and just I remember certain things very vividly, and then other things are a blur, and then and still a lot of times that's when I kind of know, like I was talking about earlier, my my grief process that I do.
Yeah.
A lot of times I know it's time to like possibly do that or get ready to do that, and usually it's because of reoccurring visions or things like that.
Oh, it's like a signal.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a early warning detection system, I guess you would call it, right? Like once you start finding these triggers, okay, you start identifying things that, all right, I gotta make time for this.
I got it. So, like your coach, when he saws you breathing hard,
Yes.
he's like, slow down.
Yeah.
So for you, it's like that's like the warning signs.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I need to.
There's a couple warning signs where it's
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
I need to make time for my grieving process and to address it and face it.
Gotcha.
So it sounds like, in a matter of speaking, what you're doing over time is having some level, and I don't want to use this word as if it's like truly what's happening here to make it, to belittle it, but it's a manner of desensitizing or destigmatizing for yourself, right? In some instances, it sounds like to where you can be able to sit with that moment.
Yeah.
And obviously it's going to be terrible, right? But to a level, it's at a place to where, okay, I can exist here though.
Yeah.
Like I can be here for a moment.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, what do they call it? Where you're getting acclimated.
Yeah.
Like acclimated to, but like it's sometimes it's not always bad. There's times where like, you're a mess, like I'm a blubbering mess.
Yeah.
Then other times it's good.
Yeah.
There's good memories when I'm going through photos or things like that. It's not, it doesn't always have to be sad.
Yeah.
And that's something else it's okay to be happy. Like,
Right.
Because I would imagine
you start getting guilt.
Yeah.
Guilt.
Yeah.
Survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
Sure.
You start having guilt. Like, man,
Yeah.
so I had, that's something else I had to learn. Like, it's okay to be happy every once in a while. I don't have to be, like, she's not going to be, like, mad at me because I'm happy right now.
Right.
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 So,
Well, she wants you to be happy.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So like so at that time, so of course you're still like, you're just like grasping, don't have the tools and everything. Did you who was in your corner? Like, did you feel like you had supports, people kind of like helping you, or at least trying to help you walk through it?
I would have to say it was Stephanie, my wife.
Yeah.
At the time. All right. She was the number one spearhead. Because we all have those friends. Like you can call me. You can call me.
Yeah.
Like you always have those. Actually, I had on my website. There was someone wrote a blog about that where and I know this is going to kind of come up because I know this has ruffled a few feathers. Kind of like what I was talking about earlier about like people trying to mean well with certain stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's where it's like, oh, you can call me anytime. You can, like you'll always see the Facebook posts where it's like, my door is always open. I'll have a pot of coffee for you, blah, blah, right? All that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what that is? That's like, that's selfish ego. And that's like, because you know what? A person at their lowest time isn't going to call you.
No.
They're not thinking about you.
No. They don't
So
care about what.
So yeah, you know what?
You know who I should call?
Yeah,
You know who I should call?
Because I realized that because like my daughter, when she was in that darkest moment of her life, she wasn't thinking about anything else except being out of that pain. You know what I mean? So if people get to a certain point of despair and darkness where the only thought in their mind is to get out of this pain that they're in, do you think they're thinking about somebody to call or anybody? No. So that's why I'm always more of the person like, if you think of somebody, how about you give them a call?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stop
Yeah.
expecting everyone to like pamper to you in your time.
Right.
If you're really that worried about somebody or you want somebody,
Call them.
yeah, how about you call them?
Right.
So like a lot of times we kind of call it, there's a person I met through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention where we go to like DC, but she calls him a God wink, which I thought was a really cool term.
That's an interesting way to say that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
a God wink would be like, let's say you're having a hard time and like your loved ones, like one of their favorite songs comes on the radio or hits your playlist, right? That would be like a God wink, right? Or someone pops into your head for no reason that you haven't thought about in a while.
You just tell
That's a
them.
God. So you know what? Every time that happens now, I'll shoot him a text or I'll give him a call.
I love that. I love
do
that.
too.
I love that. Yeah, I heard that before. It was like this idea of like, yeah, just let me know.
Yeah.
You can call me anytime. I'm always here to talk.
Yeah.
Just let me know if you need any help. And we think like the best way of like the best intentions I can give to that is like, oh, I want them to be comfortable. I don't want to burden them. But the thing is, it's more burdensome for you as the person grieving to reach out
to
than it
somebody.
is me a burden to reach out.
Exactly.
Right. And so it's only placing a greater burden on the person who has enough burdens.
Yeah.
Of putting the burden on them to reach out to you. And it's like, no, if we want to lessen the burden, let's take on that burden.
Yeah. And it's also like the other thing is like, I also tell people is you don't have to say anything. You can, I'll shoot somebody a text and just be like, hey, just watch call, man. Just checking in. Right. It doesn't, you don't have to have some like fancy line or something like that. And if you're with somebody that is grieving or suffering through a loss, and it could be any type of loss. Like grief comes in many factors. It doesn't have to be a loss of a loved one. It could be a loss of a limb, a body function.
Sure.
Things like that, right? So you don't have to say anything. If you don't have the right words to say, instead of just trying to like throw things against the wall to see what sticks, a lot of times you might cause more harm than good.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm prime example of things that said things to me, and I know that they meant well, but at the time I'm wanting to punch them in the throat. Like,
So less words is better.
Sometimes it's
less is more.
Yeah.
Less is more. What was the transition point for you in terms of like beginning to find support and tools and the help that you needed to now begin to manage your grief? If that makes sense.
First thing was obviously the physical activity. Like the regular self-care stuff, right? So getting back into jiu-jitsu training, like I was saying, starting small.
When was that from?
Oh, it was probably 3 to 4 months.
3 or 4 months.
Yeah, after my loss.
Yeah.
After I lost my daughter, like I said, I didn't want to. Yeah. I didn't want to do anything. Like honestly, I was just in a daze, laying on. Barely getting through the days, right? Yeah. Eating, drinking, like I don't. Yeah.
Were you going to work?
No. I did end up going back to work. I forget how soon it was, but
it seems like that time would just be a blur.
Yeah, and then I remember having moments when I was back at work where I had to like lock myself in my office and I would just have complete breakdowns, where I was just like, where I just uncontrolled emotions, right? Because I wasn't managing it, and then the big thing is getting yourself help, like seeing a counselor, seeing someone that specializes in it. And I know the classic line, because I've had people tell me this before, I didn't like my counselor. Then find a new one.
Yeah.
Just because you get a counselor does not mean like this is the one you have. If you don't vibe with that person, find another one. It's not like, okay, I'm gonna try.
One size fits all.
Yeah, it's like, did you find your spouse or did you find your girl like that? Like the first one,
the one
I'm stuck with. No, like you can go find another one.
Yeah.
Because I did the same thing. I've dealt with counselors before. Nah, forget that, right? But then you find one that you vibe with, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, you don't
this can work.
You don't like this taco joint? Go to another one.
Exactly, go to another one, right? Find another one.
Yeah.
And then now I got since I moved, I got found another one.
Yeah.
Get along with him well. And now it's more like a as needed basis.
Sure.
Especially for me, like we're gonna probably make some adjustments. April and May are very difficult months for me. Because April is when I lost her, and May is her birthday. Yeah, right. So it's like they're so close to each other. So they're significant, days of significance is what we call them.
Yeah.
And, we have ways of, I even have my ways of managing days of significance. Right.
Yeah. I didn't even realize this, Gene, but the day that I'd asked you to, obviously, if you would do this podcast.
Yeah.
Was April?
It was the anniversary, if I'm not mistaken.
April 11th.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know it.
Yeah. So actually, like this is the first time I've actually publicly spoke about this on a media platform. The first time I ever spoke about it was my first Grapple for Life seminar.
Wow.
Which was in 2022.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I ever talked about it publicly, period.
Yeah.
About it. And I was a mess.
Yeah.
I was a mess. you know, and then I've gotten better at,
Yeah.
you know, presenting and talking about it now, but, you know, so now I think it's like, I've been ready to, you know, and like I said, it's like a God wink,
Yeah.
right? Where it's kind of like,
Yeah.
maybe it's time for me to like speak on it on a broader term,
Yeah.
where it doesn't have to be just jujitsu practitioners
Sure.
that are hearing my story and how
Yeah, because
you know,
everybody suffers. Man.
exactly so
I'm wondering to kind of circle back to that God situation. How do you? Because it seems like obviously, like you alluded to the fact that like there was anger there, right? And I would imagine that even still to a degree, it's like you have to go and revisit some of those emotions and some of those feelings. It's never going to be completely satiated,
yeah.
right? What do you think were some of the pieces though of understanding you came to where it was like, okay, like I'm still going to experience anger towards this and a lack of not understanding. But it sounds like even with that though, there's some piece of either understanding or peace that has been drawn to you. Like, what do you think that was for you? Or do you feel like that occurred for you? Because it would seem like to even be okay with the idea of having God or religion in your life to some respect, you would have to come to a place to where it's like, no, like there's a part of this that's helpful, or like what about that
Okay,
became
so,
okay or helpful to you?
Anger, the anger part really now for me is pointed to myself, because as a dad, you know, I feel like the biggest job I ever had in my life was to take care of, you know, protect and provide, right? That's our duty as a father, and I failed. So that's like my biggest regret, my biggest anger is towards me. In wise of, you know, like, I know this is something I used all the time myself, right? Well, you know, if God's so good, then why is my daughter gone?
Right.
Since God's so good, why X, Y, Z? Why does bad things happen?
Right.
Well, God is good, all right? But there's this thing called humans and free will, right? He loves us enough to where it's free will, right? So, because of that, what he's doing is giving me the strength now to maybe do what I'm doing now, and taking that loss and gearing it towards that. I didn't lose. God isn't the reason why I lost my daughter. You know, depression, kind of a broken system in schools, a broken system in, you know, care management, and what I mean by care management is like the number of therapists and counselors available.
Ratio.
The ratios are out of control.
Yeah,
Right.
100%.
Right. And for
like you said, you were calling.
Here's something else that, like, you know, I kind of skipped over, but this is another thing that where, like, I get a lot of, and I feel so bad for the receptionist. It's not her fault, but the day after I lost my daughter, I got a call about an opening to a counselor. And I remember just unloading on this lady.
Yeah.
And I feel so bad now, you know, because she didn't deserve that. But I was just like, you know.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not going to repeat some of the things that I said.
Well,
but
sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was pretty much, it was in a very, you know, hurtful way. It's like a little too late, don't you think?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But, like I said, obviously it wasn't her fault, but
Well, no, but she's a vessel to literally take what it was. I mean, it's so interesting that you talk about the system. I was talking to a friend who's a school counselor just the other day, and she has a caseload of 700 kids as a school counselor.
yeah.
It's like there's nobody right now that wants to be a school counselor.
Yeah. So
she has 700 kids to her caseload. You think anything counseling related is actually able to circle back like fully? Like,
it's incredible. Like even like in this area, like in West Virginia and Martinsburg, like CPS, like the Child Protective Services,
Yeah.
are so they're even so
Backed up.
They're so backed up. I get very frustrated with like the government too, like the amount of money that goes into all sorts of places, but
Yeah.
we can't pay.
Yeah.
Like I think the for example, Child Protective Services, I think in Martinsburg makes less than $40,000 a year.
Yeah. Well, the average
Wow.
therapist
And-
makes
yeah,
less than 50.
Exactly,
usually.
and you're talking about like, you're dealing with some
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
some gnarly
high threshold.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife worked for Child Protective Services for a while, and some of the stuff that you hear about, like,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable.
Makes your skin crawl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I've said that I've had these conversations with a lot of, like my military friends, law enforcement friends, and just,
Yeah.
the community, where it's like, we have weapons where we can like shoot missiles through a target's window of a home, but we can't find, funding for, additional counselors,
Yeah.
or maybe even like a incentive for people to go to school for more,
Yeah.
like maybe a tuition buyback
Yeah.
program, to where like it kind of gives an incentive for
Oh, yeah.
people to go into that field,
Yeah.
or
No,
even
it's,
like
it's very low because I mean the burnout rate's so high too.
yes, absolutely.
It's like you're carrying people's stuff, right? Like because you get accustomed to hearing these cases, and it's so difficult to not to like, because obviously we're supposed to be able to separate, right? We're supposed to be able to do the thing and
we're
be
not-
Yeah.
completely
Right.
objective,
Okay, yeah.
Like robots.
like
Turn it
no,
off.
no
Yeah,
thoughts,
exactly.
turn it like.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
It's like that leave it at the door.
Yeah, leave it
Yeah,
at the door.
yeah,
Come
yeah.
on.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
to a degree, right? You get better at it. You
Yes.
desensitize to a degree because you
Yeah.
can hear some shit. Excuse
Yeah.
me. But like,
Yeah.
excuse my
Yeah,
language,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you
yeah.
can like,
Yeah, yeah,
and you
yeah.
get used to hearing a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at some level, like if you are a human being,
Exactly.
like you're gonna connect.
Yeah.
Like that is going to happen. And so, and the burden of that takes a toll.
Yeah.
Like invariably, it has to.
Absolutely. What's that running joke that therapists have therapists?
Yeah. Well, so I had a.
Or yeah.
Yeah. Therapists need therapists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a professor in school, which I loved this adage, and I'm going to steal it from her, but she always used to say, well, yeah, I mean, you're an intellectual prostitute. Like that's effectively what we are. Like, it's like we're being used for our ears and our brains, right? Like to a degree. And it's like this, and again, not to make it crude, but in any case, it's,
Well, sometimes that humor is what's needed,
yes.
or those
Yeah.
kind of terms. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of people like people talk about like the sense of humor in the law enforcement community and the military community.
100%.
All
You
that
need it.
stuff.
You have to have it.
They have some we have some gnarly jokes and gnarly
Mm-hmm.
ways of like dealing with situations
Yeah.
based off of
Yeah.
like that's a coping mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like other people, like you could be talking story, and like people that aren't in that field or that group are looking at you guys, like you guys are psycho, and we're laughing about.
No, but you have
Yeah.
to do that.
Yep.
You have to do that.
Yeah, they say some of the best comedians have been through the hardest experiences.
Well, no,
It's
it's
like they use humor to find ways to cope.
Yeah, it's kind of like some of the most depressed people
Yeah.
are so good at
oh yeah,
making other people happy.
Exactly.
yeah. Norm Macdonald. I mean, yeah. I think
Robin Williams. Was
Robin
another one.
Williams.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
He's another
Chris
one.
Farley.
Yep.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. But going back to what you said, it's the idea of like we have guided missiles, but misguided values.
Yes, that's a wonderful term you just
It's
said.
like the irony and the paradox
Yep.
of our times.
But I mean, I guess in history, that's how it's always been. Us as humans, we've always figured out the ways of hurting each other, but not healing each other as much. You know?
I'm wondering for you with that, like on that note of values, what do you feel like are some of those that either developed the most for you during this experience, or were established the most for you during this experience?
I would being more open to man, that's the values is just like being more empathetic in the way I talk to people.
How do you mean?
So
Like,
okay, so
because like empathy,
Yeah.
like that word gets tossed around a lot.
yes,
but yeah,
okay.
what do
So
you
what I mean
mean?
by that is like,
Sorry, the
Dale-
low-key, I actually hate
Dale
that
has
word.
a problem with that
Yes.
word.
okay, so
But I think you mean it differently than
yeah, so not to be so quick to like slam on people.
Okay.
Right. So I used to be a lot quicker about like joking, clowning, or shaming somebody about like something. But I've realized now, like, you don't know what somebody might be going through.
Sure.
Right. So I try to be more mindful. So
yeah.
I have more trying to increase like how I treat people.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. So your awareness.
Yeah, my awareness of that and
And-
my faith was probably the
Okay.
big one, and,
And-
like following those, you know, like the first commandments that were given by Jesus, which was, you know, love God with all your strength, heart, and soul,
Yeah.
and love others as you love yourself.
How do you feel like that? Like, because obviously, like people hearing this, yeah, maybe like plenty of people hearing this are either atheistic, agnostic, but like, how do you feel like the idea of a deity telling you to do that has helped you?
It's helped me because it provides me a sense of comfort, but then it also knowing that he knows my pain. One of a good friend, actually one of my students, Peter, he told me God knows what it's like to lose
A child.
yeah.
It's a profound thing.
Yeah. And I remember when he said that to me. And so there's that relatableness.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't, and it's a little different because he sent his to go through the torture and the crucifixion. Right.
Yeah.
So he understands. So I can, understand.
It's interesting
do that.
too, because the way that I think about what you just described, like if you think about God in the sense of like being outside of time as well,
Yeah.
right? I've seen all these different like types of metaphors, like even with like Rob Bell, for example, on everything is spiritual, which is a really fascinating little talk to watch. But if you think about God also being in time but out of time, like outside of our time, our concept of time, it brings to mind the idea that he was experiencing like not knowing what would happen to his child,
Yeah.
and also experiencing knowing. And that's very profound, because on the one hand, like as a parent, you'd want to do something about that. But on the other, there's also that equal profoundness with being completely blindsided, right? And that's only possible if you are actually outside of an experience, right? You don't actually know what's happened. And so it sounds like, to a degree, like he removed himself from that, or it just was by default. And that's to me, that's a very profound idea.
Where he was limiting his powers in certain aspects, right? And I know that it's very hard for some people to grasp, because it kind of took me, but like our minds are not going to be able to
No way.
completely
understand.
Yeah.
No
And that's something that us as humans inherently want to do, is always have understanding.
Why?
Yeah.
And,
Exactly.
Some
You
control.
always want that, right? But there's some things you just have to come to terms with, that you're just not going to have full understanding of,
Yeah.
or you're not going to get an answer to.
Yeah.
Kind of like in the case of my daughter on why, I'm not going to get that full answer.
Yeah.
Right. And in the case of my faith, I'm just not going to have full answers to all of it. Right. But I'm going to lead towards where the evidence has pointed me, and that's where I'm going to go.
Well, it sounds like also what you're saying is you're going to lead towards a part of value that supported you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like, you can't prove God, right? But it sounds like what you're also saying is that this idea of faith was something that drastically shifted some things for you.
Yeah.
And I think faith, like with faith, is the idea of possibility,
Yeah.
right? Because there's a saying that tragedy doesn't destroy us, hopelessness does. And with hope is the idea of possibility. Like I think for many, grief is, you think there's what is there beyond, like the question you were asking, like why even go on, and it's like the possibilities like crumble.
Yeah.
But then beginning to realize that even amidst all of this, there is possibility, there is hope, there is a future.
Yep.
And I'm curious to hear from you how that journey continued, because I knew earlier you kind of gave a good summary of like the ways not only you manage your own grief, but the tangible, like your nonprofit, for example.
Yeah.
Right? Is you came to a point where you were able to integrate your loss and into like your present and create something beautiful and wonderful out of it. I don't know if we should go there yet. Do you still want to like dwell on the?
Oh no, I think that's a good place to go.
Yeah.
I want to be sure though, like is my time on my, is that going to run out?
We at 1:30. We have 1
Okay,
hour
good.
30.
Excellent.
All right.
So yes,
Yeah.
I want to go there then.
Yeah. So we got
If
we
you-
have 20. Yeah. about 20 minutes left.
Okay.
So I want to. I think that's a great question. If so, it sounds like what you're saying that is. Can you repeat that?
Yeah. So like, and the grief science says as well, right, that
Grief science, right? That's
yeah.
that's such a funny term.
yeah, they call it the grief science.
Okay.
Yeah, the grief science.
Thank you, Kubler
Is
Ross.
that we either deal with the grief, and grief is, again, like it's one of those things. It was described as being thrust into a foreign country where you don't speak the language, and it's like nobody knows how to deal with grief. Like it's just, you're just thrown into this foreign place and you just like flailing, right? And then you have to learn that. And some people either like live in the past and they're just like ruminating and like can't, just living in the past.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of like, how do I move on but also hold on? Because it's like, I don't want to like move on and forget the person I've lost, but at the same time, how do I hold on yet move on in that? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes absolute sense.
And how do I integrate all of this? And it sounds like you've done it in a very beautiful way. And then maybe you wouldn't even use that language of moving on, right?
I went through the same process like you were just talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like I didn't want to forget. Like I remember times like, am I going to forget her voice? Am I going to forget her laugh? Am I going to I don't want to forget.
Yeah.
Right. And if I move on, then I'm leaving her behind. That's not true. Right. So, and this is where like my grieving process allows me to go through those memories and remember those things and listen to like some of her recordings and things like that, and going through like the cards she's made me. And this is where something I also tell like other people all the time, like never take for granted like
Single
gifts,
Yeah.
events that your kids go through. And if you want to take photos, you take photos. And if you want to take as many as you want, you take as many photos as you want. I wish I had more photos. I wish I had more videos.
Yeah.
Right. So like I always tell people like, do it.
Do it.
Yeah. Don't worry about what other people think or this and that. Just do it. Just do it. But getting back onto what I ended up doing with, that is, I remember how much my teammates in like jiu-jitsu helped me, because it was like the only time where like I couldn't feel anything. Like you guys train, so when you have a skilled opponent trying to like strangle you, right? You don't have time to be like in your feels about whatever's going on, right? And this is why. So I would just be in that moment of like training and sparring or whatever we were going through, and there was times where I was rolling and sparring, and I didn't even know, but I was like just crying. And I remember like my training partners, they got to the point where they're like, they wouldn't stop. they understood what I was. So they were just like,
Yeah. You go through it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they would just
Keep going.
keep going. You know, and
Yeah.
so I realized how much that helps. So that's where I started coming up with like, how can I help others with jiu-jitsu? And
Yeah. There's a beautiful quote from Pablo Picasso, right? And shoot, am I going to butcher it or am I going to remember it? The purpose of your life is to find your gift. And or wait, am I saying it backwards? The meaning of your life is then to give it away. Right.
Yeah.
I might have that backwards. But essentially the idea is, okay, you find that thing, but then the value in it is then giving it away.
yeah.
Giving it up, which metaphorically speaking, like if we were to relate this to a value on faith in Christianity, is extremely profound.
Yeah.
Because literally he came to provide life and then he literally gave it away.
Yep.
And it's oof.
Yeah. It's powerful.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very valid point. And I didn't even think about it in that aspect too. You know, that's something else that's like that really hits. You know.
Well, it's interesting to hear your story because it sounds like in so many ways there's so many pieces that fit together for you.
Yeah.
In this intricate design of a process. And it's honestly a very cool story to hear. Like and I wish we had more time to flush it out even more because I'm sure there's so many more details in there that like even more so like with how the way you were describing earlier, like, okay, like I was 3 sheets to the wind, I was gone here in these moments.
Yep.
Right. And like there in that moment, imagining being here in this moment now.
Yeah, it's like I would never. Yeah, it was not even to think that I'd be here right now having this conversation with you guys. Then was
Impossible.
Yeah, exactly. It's not even like a
Blip on the
computable number, right?
Yeah.
So, but wise of like, I started doing a lot of deep diving research into suicide because of this.
Yeah.
You know? And that was another kind of like a coping
Absolutely.
process, right?
Well, because that has to, in some degree, you mentioned earlier, okay, you're never going to know why, but you still have to try.
Yeah. So you start looking.
You still have to be able to articulate something to be able to understand on a loose level that, okay, I can't understand this thing, but I can understand perhaps what leads to this thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's where like I also brought up like, you know, it's never just one thing.
Exactly.
Right. Like usually there's always some sort of mental health issue that's going on there. It could be depression. It could be, you know, an undiagnosed bipolar. It could be all sorts. And I know you guys know a lot more about that area than I do.
Hey, but you've become,
you know,
an expert in that yourself.
So, and then I started looking at like numbers and things like that, you know, and it's like, it's between the ages of 10 and 34. It's the second leading cause of death in the United States.
That's such a profound, that spectrum is huge.
10 years old.
Yeah, 10
to 34, right?
Wow.
And overall, it's the 11th, right? So it's just outside the top 10.
Well, and then you have heart disease and everything there, like which is probably is that still at the top?
Accidental. I think accidental
death. Okay.
I think usually always could be number one.
Yeah, because of car accident.
Yeah, things like that. You know?
But like we don't really think about those per se, not to wipe them off the list, but it's like that even the fact that it's where it's at is extremely profound.
So that is actually the age group that I try to address because my daughter fits in that age group.
Yeah.
Right? So, like. My foundation, Grapple for Life, what I do is between the ages of 10 and 34, I will sponsor if they have a higher risk factor for suicide or they're a suicide loss survivor. Okay, because that also raises your risk for suicide, which a lot of people don't, or, you know,
100%,
are unaware of. So, you know, we get them training. and we get them around a team environment. And we already know that physical activity.
So you're saying like your foundation then like helps provide them training, like for
Yes,
jiu-jitsu.
and it doesn't have to just be jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
Because let's say they have a medical condition. Like there was one young lady that she has serious knee issues where she couldn't like do a lot of the stuff that's related. So we got her into a boxing program. Cool. Right. So we get them around a team, we get them physically active, and then we monitor them. Like we'll check in with the coaches and we'll check in with the family at least once a month. We'll send resources to them.
That's cool.
And then, and we've had some great success, and we got kids that we've successfully had go through the program. And I have a board, and we dictate based off of the paperwork that they fill out how long we'll sponsor them. If it's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, depending on the severity of it, and then
that's really
we
special.
monitor it from then. And then we've had like law enforcement, military will reach out.
Yeah.
There's so many more avenues for military, law enforcement, and fire. So we will give them options, like adopt a cop, or like there's other programs for them that will be that medium where we'll do what we call a soft handoff. Right. Where I'll take them and be like, hey, we're going to move you over to this group that's probably a better fit for you.
Yeah.
And because if you military, law enforcement, fire, and first responders, things like that, they have a lot more options for treatment than let's say a 10.
Sure.
14,
a 10-year-old
15.
kid. Yeah.
Exactly. So
especially given
I'm trying to bridge that gap between that area. So
that's fantastic,
man. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'd love to. And after this, obviously, I think what we can do here is go ahead and put a link for your foundation in the comments and everything, and really.
And you said you're also part of the American
Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Yep. So I'm part of the West Virginia chapter.
Okay.
I'm the public policy chair, and I'm a board member. So public policy chair, I basically deal with. I'll go to like the state capitol. I'll take advocates with me, and then we will lobby for better mental health and suicide prevention measures. Like funding for 988. Sure. We're actually trying to get funding to get new River Gorge Bridge.
Yeah.
There's it's that national park, that bridge is
a hot zone.
And we're trying to get a study done on that.
Yeah.
The one thing that like bridge barriers and things like that. But there's a national bridge jumping day that makes a lot of money where they don't want to deal with that.
That's so interesting because I actually rappelled off that bridge for Bridge Day.
But we've
years ago.
People have come in from out of state to jump off that bridge.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a hot spot. It's actually listed as in the top 10 of the most dangerous national parks
for
in the
that
United
reason.
States. So the reason we want a study done is because they kind of group all the deaths in one. They don't really.
They don't. They don't
distinguish.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
we're trying to get a study like to distinguish that. But we've also had success with like funding for 988. K through 12 schools. We had a House bill that ended up getting passed
That's excellent.
2 years ago, where like suicide prevention resources are on student IDs now, and also there's more broadcasts. There's more resources available for students, available to them in the offices and in the for that. And then in June, I also work nationally with the national, where all the chapters come together and we lobby in DC. So I do work with them also. Trying to find time for both sometimes can be a little tough, but
busy man.
But it's worth it. It's worth it. So
No,
and then
amazing.
And then I also have like my Grapple for Life Invitational, which is where I set up matches. I mean, you were actually in one of my first invitation.
You were at the first one. It was good.
The first ever Grapple for Life Invitational I ever held.
Broken the brown belt.
So,
It was good.
So is there one upcoming?
Yes, there is one upcoming June 28th. This one's going to be in Warren County Middle School.
And is that going to be like live streamed or anything?
It is going to be a live stream
on
the YouTube channel, Grapple for Life.
Okay.
And it's going to be a quintet format. We got a lot of great teams and women teams that will be competing. And
that'll be really cool.
All the funding goes to, paying the athletes and also going towards, the sponsorship program and to the foundation, so we can continue making more resources and keeping everything going.
What is your goal for Grapple for Life?
Big. I want it to be as big as possible and help as many,
So
people as possible. If that means,
yeah,
obviously I'd like a bigger board, having volunteers in throughout, like in all the states.
so
You know
does
what I
that
mean? Like,
does that mean like making more chapters in different states then?
yes.
Is that how that
and
would
it
go?
Could, it could be even a jiu-jitsu gym that starts taking, I got like some jiu-jitsu gyms, in other areas, like OBX over in North Carolina. We have Rough Stock, where like they're asking for resources,
Sure.
our resources to be sent to them so they can broadcast it. We also have some with like Enlist 9 group, Renzo schools.
Yeah, we definitely need some of your stuff too.
Obviously,
I'd love
River
to.
Bend. There's a lot of more schools. I can just keep naming off because the support's been really good, especially in the local area, and some out of state too. But I want even more, and a lot of them they don't know we exist yet.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of times when I reach out to a school because I'm trying to sponsor a kid, they're unaware. And they're kind of unaware of what I'm trying to do, so I got to break it down for them. So I want to get to the point where it's like a lot more, they know. And then also like
knowledge.
if they come across it, they know who to call.
Yeah.
Like if they come across, let's say they hear like a mom talking about, one of their a student
like,
or something, whatever, right? And they can be like, yo,
immediately.
like
Yeah.
here's a
Yes.
here's the contact information for this. Maybe we can get them training,
Yeah.
and then.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. No, we'll definitely have to have more conversations about that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome, man. They say the goal. If your goal in grief is to end grief, then you're probably not going somewhere.
Yeah.
But in your case, it sounds like you found meaning.
Yeah.
As a way to manage your grief.
Embrace it.
Yeah.
Manage it.
Yeah.
Move through it and around it, and then also know how to channel it. So
amazing work you guys are doing.
Yeah. Well, this was clearly not even enough time, I think.
Yeah.
Still, even though it's been like the time flew by, but it was definitely not enough time. We'll have to be able to get more into the weeds at another point in time. And so I would love to have you on again at some point, but this was at bare minimum a great opportunity and a great conversation. And so I really can't thank you enough just for being able to share what you have and also for, and this is, I want to say this is straightforward and as delicately as possible, but thank you for going through what you've gone through.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to tell my story. It's something that I know I've had to eventually do, but I wasn't prepared to do. And like I said, I think I don't really believe in coincidences. So
no, there's a lot. There was a lot. There'd have to be a lot of really random things, and it's wild. Like like
I remember, like when you asked, and I was just kind of like, I think it's time.
And dude, like I said, like I had no, like after I sent you that text, like I was like, oh no, like in my head I was like, how could I, like I didn't even know the day, right? And I don't know whether that was something for you that was like I don't know what that was for you, but
I've also, like, that's not your fault though, because I've also been very closed about it. I don't always, it's not something I broadcast all the time. And it is a day of significance, but it's not like I'm not big on like putting it out on social media. Like today's,
well, and that's why I find it also so profound. Like in your situation, it's like, okay, this, if I'm you and this guy reaches out to me about this, like randomly to share this on this day.
Exactly.
Like it's wild.
That's wild. That is wild.
And that's where, like, I think I appreciate the opportunity of coming out, and also being a guest, being your guys' first guest.
First guest,
100%.
Such an honor.
Such an honor.
Wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, Good.
Great.
Appreciate it, man.
And
thank you.
love to do it again.
100%. We will.
So, absolutely.
And I guess in good fashion, that's a wrap for this one.
That's a wrap.
All right.
All right, man.
All right.
Until next time.